Hi everyone. Using software can be infuriating. It should be able to do this one simple thing, and yet it can't. Until the last 2 years or so, if you wanted something custom, you had to learn to code. But now, you can just tell an AI what you want in plain English, and it builds it for you. We've moved from operating an interface to directing AI agents. And that shift has far-reaching consequences for work and for our society. I'm Dr. Waku, an AI safety researcher, and I help you understand how AI is changing the world. This video has 3 parts: the rise of coding agents, custom software is cheap, and broader implications. Part 1, the rise of coding agents. This story is broader than just code, but let's start there. It turns out AI can write code now, and it can write code very well. Earlier versions of AI coders were basically tools meant to be used by programmers to speed up their work somewhat. But now you have agentic AI systems dominating, and these are systems that are meant to go off on their own and create code autonomously without input from humans. For example, Cursor has an agentic mode. OpenAI has Codex, and Anthropic has Claude Code. As an example, I heard last year sometime that Anthropic had an 11,000-line commit that was created entirely by AI. They basically just merged the code to production without meaningful human oversight because it passed all their internal tests. And at the time, this sounded preposterous. The more code you change at once, the more likely it is that something goes wrong. So if a human were to create an 11,000-line code change, it would definitely be rejected. But now, fast forward to 2026, and these tools, especially Claude Code, have been getting a lot of attention because they've gotten so good. Here's an extreme example from this month. The CEO of Cursor used OpenAI's Codex model to create an entire web browser. That's right, he wrote one prompt, I don't know how long it was, but one prompt saying, please create a web browser. And then this model ran uninterrupted for an entire week, and at the end produced 3 million lines of code. And this hacked together agent browser was actually able to render things like the Google homepage. Apparently it had some layout issues and things like that, but not too shabby for a zero-shot attempt to create a web browser from scratch. Another recent example comes to us from Jana Dogan, who is a principal engineer at Google. She described how her team at Google had spent the last year building a system. So this is multiple Google engineers spending a full year creating a system, and how she was able to prompt Claude Code to replicate that system in just one session. Now, this isn't a fully fair comparison because usually there's some amount of requirements change when a team is working on something for a year, and presumably she would have had the updated requirements when asking Claude Code to replicate it. But it still shows an immense amount of work that can be done by AI coding agents today to match a team of the best engineers in the world, essentially. So if I can take a step back for a moment, how has coding evolved? I would say that in the beginning, writing code was mostly about keeping track of all the details. For example, I used to keep track of all the branch delay slots in my assembly code myself, which is something that the compiler should really be doing, but it made you seem like a good programmer at the time. Later, I would say that programming became about accessing a body of knowledge. This knowledge could be on the internet, for example, through Stack Overflow, or it could be in a large code base and you use an IDE to keep track of everything and search through the code base for you. Now we've made an equally large, if not larger, change when we are using AI in a coding workflow. People who understand the system much more deeply still have a significant edge because AI tools are new, but this edge will disappear as agents become more and more powerful over the next year or two. This progression that coding went through is going to happen the same way for many other jobs. First, there will be AI tools that help humans work more efficiently. Then, there will be agents that you can delegate substantial amounts of work to. And finally, there will be powerful agents that do almost the entire job on their own. All 3 of these steps, but of course, especially the last one, lead to substantial job loss. Why pay a human, which costs a lot of money, when you can just get an AI system to do the job instead? Right now in software engineering, we're at the stage where junior software engineering positions are vanishing. But eventually, it will likely seem very antiquated to imagine having a human actually write code for you. Part 2. Custom software is cheap. The name software came about in opposition to hardware because software is much cheaper to change and create than hardware. But historically, it has still been very expensive to actually create software. You need a lot of skill to write production quality code. So now we have hardware, software, and vibe coding, essentially, where vibe coding is orders of magnitude cheaper than creating software. The quality might not be as high, yet, but the cost is certainly way, way down. Of course, this has all kinds of implications, but first, let's talk about entrepreneurship. So traditionally, entrepreneurship is this huge bootstrapping problem, right? You can't create your product yet, so instead you create mock-ups of it and you try to get money for it. But you can't get money yet because you don't have your product. And this is part of what makes entrepreneurship so challenging. But now people are doing vibe founding, where you basically use AI coding agents to create a working prototype for you. And this is game-changing for creating companies because you don't have to ask an investor to imagine what it would be like. You can kind of show them an early version. I had the good fortune to be participating in a hackathon recently, and I was paired up with a very experienced AI coder. He used Claude Code to basically create a huge multi-agent infrastructure for security in the 1.5 days that we worked on the system. And after a while, I started getting the hang of it too. If you follow my channel, you might know that I have a health condition, which means I can't type a whole lot on a computer keyboard. And someone on a previous video wrote, AI will make you a coder again. And you know what? I think they were right. But of course, cheap software has implications far beyond entrepreneurship and hackathons and high throughput environments like that. I want to illustrate this with an example of how things used to be. Many years ago, I used to use a Linux desktop, which was not very popular, and therefore the list of wireless networks that you could connect to was not sorted, and it drove me crazy. So I modified the source code of that app to add the sorting. I think it would sort by secured networks first and unsecured networks later. And I ran my own version of that code for years. But I probably suffered it for at least 6 months before I changed anything, because there's a very high barrier to entry to actually trying to modify code, even for something as simple as adding sorting. There were multiple languages involved, and I had to replicate build environments and install dependencies, and it's complicated. And you know what the funny thing is, because it's an open source project, I submitted this patch for sorting stuff to the maintainer of the package, and they didn't accept it because they couldn't agree on whether the sorting, the way I had done it, was best. You know, did you want them sorted by name, or do you want them sorted with the secure networks first, and this type of thing. Fast forward to now. If you have AI and you think to yourself, this interface is pretty silly, you could just ask your AI in natural English to essentially make this change for you. Please sort my networks with the secure networks first. With appropriate scaffolding, the AI could just go off and do that for you. And I predict that many people will create such tools and tweaks for themselves because the cost is so low now. Here's another fun example. After the massive success that Claude Code has been seeing recently, the team at Anthropic thought to themselves, why can't we get regular people to use this? After all, it's just an English language interface. It's not too complicated. So they made a new product called Claude Cowork, as in coworker, I guess, which is basically doing the same thing, except it just operates on files rather than on code, and it has a less scary name. It's not calling itself Claude Code, and therefore it's meant to appeal to a broader audience. But you know what the funny thing is? They spent a week and a half developing this new system, and it's not a straightforward product. I understand that it actually creates virtual machines to isolate the behavior that different agents are doing so that they don't mess each other up and things like this. So that would take substantial engineering effort, except that it didn't, because Claude Code did the substantial engineering effort. And now this opens up the ability to everybody to do things with your files the same way that a programmer would do things with their code. For example, do you know how many times a relative or a colleague has asked me to change a bunch of file names all at once, or look for duplicate files and remove them, or whatever? This is basically just one command on the command line, but if you are not using the command line, then it seems like a ton of manual effort to do. Well, now it will just be one line of English command to your local agent running on your system. And I'm not saying this is necessarily a good idea in these early stages. Of course, all the companies, not just Anthropic, are going to come out with their own version of Claude Cowork, and you will have many options in the near future. And I've read too many horror stories about early versions of AI agents deciding to delete all your code during a code freeze or whatever. But at least the virtual machine architecture will reduce the chances of things going badly wrong. In a sense, it's like the command line is back, except it's very forgiving of typos and mistakes and great for novice users. And the end game is that when everybody has their own custom environment or their own ability to customize their environment, so much creativity and power is unlocked. It's an absolute nightmare from a security perspective, but if you have sufficient curiosity or an entrepreneurial mindset, it multiplies what you can do with your time. Software that would otherwise not be worth the time to add this feature actually gets created. And it seems like every piece of software has a fancy ASCII colored text interface with progress bars that whirl around in circles now. What can I say? It's going to be interesting. Part 3, broader implications. Not everybody noticed, but this rise of agents, and coding agents in particular, was actually predicted. It shouldn't come as a surprise. It was probably predicted by too many sources to count, but I'm going to focus on one here, which is AI 2027. AI 2027 is a scenario about how the future of AI development might look like. And it's called AI 2027 because all of the action happens in the year 2027, basically, and you very quickly get to superhuman AI. This scenario was just using median estimates for timelines, so it could be faster or slower, and the general consensus now is that their timelines were a bit too aggressive and that it's maybe going to take a bit longer than they anticipated. It was published in April 2025, so it's already been out for multiple months, but it's still one of the resources I most recommend to people new to AI safety. So if that's you, definitely check it out. I'll put the link up here somewhere. The original is a long but quite readable story that had input from a novelist, I think, to make sure it was easy to read. And there's also a shorter text summary that you can look at if you like. And finally, there are lots of really excellent YouTube videos about it, although I never made my own yet. Maybe I should, but I'll link a YouTube video over here that covers AI 2027 in good detail. For this video, I'll just summarize. Basically, it predicted that companies would develop agents throughout 2025, then coding agents that could write code, and eventually superhuman coding agents. In other words, agents that would be much better than any humans at writing code. AI companies would start to use their superhuman coding agents to do AI research for them, eventually getting superhuman AI researchers. Because why not? The coding agents are cheaper and faster than human developers at any given task, so you get them to do research. And now the automated researchers are cheaper and faster than any human AI researchers, so of course you lean on them. But this is where it gets really dangerous. When your AI is building your next AI, and it can do so in just a few weeks or days, how do you know that the new AI is actually trustworthy? You didn't have a lot of input into how it was actually built. So a small misalignment in the original AI system could magnify into very large misalignments in future systems, and then you could use them to build yet another more powerful AI and not notice that you're already in serious trouble. So in one ending for the story, the developers notice that they actually have serious trouble, that their current AI researcher is pretty misaligned. They roll back to an older and slower version and proceed more carefully. And in the other ending for the story, they just proceed ahead anyway, even though they notice that there's some misalignment in their AI system, because there would be enormous economic incentive to just keep going forward, keep getting more and more powerful systems to outdo their competitors. And in this scenario, every human ends up dying within a year or two as a result. It's kind of scary to think about. The future is unfolding as predicted in AI 2027, even if they had a more aggressive timeline than has happened in reality. And to be honest, I'm not sure they had a more aggressive timeline when I see how capable Claude Code is these days. So the future is unfolding as predicted, and if we continue down this path, it's really dangerous for humanity if we take the wrong decisions. And people aren't even aware that we have difficult decisions ahead. So yeah, that's one reason I make YouTube videos. Slightly off topic, but I was talking with a friend of mine who's mostly a non-coder who was using Claude to build a to-do system. He hooked up voice recognition on his computer to talk to Claude. So he basically speak in English, like format all my journal entries for October in such and such a way, and Claude would just go off and do it. The voice recognition was using Whisper, by the way, and it was running on CPU. Didn't even need GPUs. I was pretty blown away by this use case. You know, somebody not really into customizing their environment a lot, not really into writing code all the time, yet figuring out how to completely change their computer's environment to work better for them. Also, one other thing that agents have given us recently. We finally have the answer to a long-standing question. Can AI truly be creative, or is it basically just predicting things it's already seen before? If you watch my videos, you probably know the answer to that already, but nevertheless, apparently a math professor gave Grok 4.20 an open problem, something to do with harmonic analysis. I have no idea. And within 5 minutes, it found a novel Bellman function that humans had been searching for years. I'll try to link that in the description below for anybody you know who might be saying things like, I'll believe that AI will be transformative when I see it actually making scientific progress, because now it is. Finally, in conclusion, we talked about how coding agents have become much better and much more widely used. In fact, I forgot to mention Anthropic's revenue was $1 billion about a year ago, and it's about 10 times that today. And one of the main things Anthropic is known for is very good coding agents. So that just gives you an idea of the scale of this. We've gone from human programmers to human programmers using AI as a tool to help them do a few things, to AI agents that are autonomously creating large code commits and large pieces of software. This means that custom software is becoming cheaper and cheaper. You might have thought I was making up vibe founding, but no, I saw a business professor tweeting about this, how he had run a course on vibe founding and found that it was immensely successful. And if you're not a coder, you could try out Claude Cowork and see what happens when you give one folder of files to Claude and then ask Claude to interact with those files in whatever way you can think of, which all sounds great, and it is at the individual level. I encourage everybody to go out and figure out how the tools that exist can help them personally. But as always in AI safety, it's all good and golden until the point where it's not. And as we develop more and more powerful agents, we end up putting tons of people out of work and unbalancing society, basically, and getting closer to the point where we might actually lose control of those very powerful agents. If you want to take action on this topic, I highly suggest reading AI 2027 in detail, and then telling your friends about this video or about that resource. If you want to participate in my community, you can also join our Discord and talk more about these topics there. Finally, if you liked this video, check out this previous one I made about why AI is not like other technology, and in fact, will probably end up changing everything. Well, that's all I have for today. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.